As President Zelensky arrives in Washington for talks at the White House, Donald Trump has been posting on his Truth Social platform. He's insisted that Volodymyr Zelensky could end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wanted to, or he can continue to fight. Now, he also appeared to rule out Kyiv joining NATO as part of a peace deal. No going into NATO by Ukraine, he says. Some things never change. Well, shortly after arriving in Washington, the Ukrainian leader said that he shared a strong desire to end the fighting quickly. Leaders from across Europe, including the EU and also NATO, are set to join President Zelensky for these talks. Well, those in Washington will include the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, along with the French President, Emmanuel Macron, Germany's Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, and the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. Also in attendance, the NATO Secretary-General, Mark Rutte, and the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen. Well, on Sunday, President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who's already met President Putin several times this year, called the security guarantees agreed in Alaska as game-changing. He said that the offer would be similar to that of NATO membership, which guarantees a collective response to any external attack. Well, it comes 3 days after Mr. Trump met the Russian leader Vladimir Putin in Alaska in a significant tilt towards Moscow by the American leader, but which his administration insists made progress towards an end to the war. Well, we can begin our coverage with our security correspondent, Frank Gardner, who joins us live now. So, Frank, all eyes now moving from Alaska to Washington with the claims by Steve Witkoff that Russia has agreed to allow the US and Europe to give Ukraine robust security guarantees as part of a potential peace deal. But do we understand what these potential security guarantees could look like?
No, or at least only in the very broadest terms. I mean, I think today's meeting really is going to be crunch time for Ukraine and its European allies, because it's clear that Russia and America are moving closer. I mean, specifically, the two presidents are moving closer to what they think is an acceptable deal. Whether that is an acceptable deal to Ukraine and its European allies is very much in doubt. So what are these security guarantees? What's being talked about is something called an Article 5 style guarantee. Now, President Trump has ruled out Ukraine joining NATO. NATO is underpinned by something called Article 5, which means that if one NATO member is attacked, the whole of NATO comes to its defense, all 32 nations. Ukraine isn't going to belong to NATO, but the suggestion is that it will have a similar style of guarantee. Ukrainians are going to be very wary of this because they were offered guarantees before in 1994, the Budapest Memorandum, the Minsk Agreement following later on, and ceasefires were broken, deals were broken. They don't trust Vladimir Putin, frankly, even if Donald Trump does. And the deal, I think, that is going to be presented to Zelensky today in the White House, flanked by some of his European allies, is essentially he's going to be asked to trade land for security guarantees. And Zelensky is in a very tight position here because Ukraine's constitution doesn't allow him to give away land to the Russian occupier. And so Donald Trump is going to say, well, then you're an obstacle to peace. And that could mean the risk here for Ukraine is that the US walks away from support. And it's now just down to the Europeans without US backing, if that happens, to help Ukraine.
So a lot of expectation then with what will happen in Washington. Of course, we've got these EU leaders, the UK leader, Mark Rutte there as well, I guess, in order to flank Volodymyr Zelensky and offer him support. Is that, what's your assessment, Frank? Is that going to sway Donald Trump, or could that potentially even go as far as to annoy him?
It could do. I mean, part of this is about optics. I mean, nobody wants a repeat of that horrendous February the 28th showdown in the Oval Office where Donald Trump and J.D. Vance kind of ganged up on Zelensky and told him, you're gambling with people's lives, you don't have all the cards, all of that. So it's partly to kind of show support. It's essentially to convince President Trump that Europe's security is inextricably linked to Ukraine's future, and that they don't want a deal done behind Ukraine's back, stitched up, that is concocted between Russia and America alone that doesn't involve Ukraine. So it's about a united front, and it's about pinning down exactly what these security guarantees are going to be. And the devil is in the detail here, because it's all very well talking about a coalition of the willing and a reassurance force and boots on the ground and all these rather tired phrases and cliches. But does this mean that in the event of a peace deal and eventually a kind of cessation of hostilities is agreed and it's decided that Russia will get no more land, and if Russia breaks that, who's going to be firing that missile from the Typhoon or the F-35 fighter plane at those Russian column of tanks, should they decide to go further? And that's something that Europe, the European leaders, they want to know exactly, has the US got their back? Does a security guarantee mean that the US cavalry is going to ride to their rescue, so to speak? Or is this just a nice, convenient way of saying, yeah, don't worry, it's all done, just end the war? Because remember that the other thing is that the Europeans in Ukraine are desperate for a ceasefire. People sitting in Washington who haven't been to Kyiv have no idea what it's like to live through a night of constant drone attacks. You know, myself and other correspondents, we do this when we go to Ukraine. We just get a tiny taste of what Ukrainians in cities all over that country are putting up with every night. The whine of these drones coming in, the rattle of machine gun fire, the crump of explosions, and in the morning you read how many people have been killed. This is happening night after night. So Ukraine and its allies are saying, please, a ceasefire first. Trump seems to have lost interest in that idea.
Frank, as always, really good to get your assessments. Our security correspondent there, Frank Gardner. And Frank makes the point of those continuing air raids across Ukraine. Let's cross over to Kyiv because my colleague Katie Watson joins us live now. And Katie, we were hearing from Frank Gardner there how the air raids all continue across Ukraine. And that's certainly the case with more attacks overnight.
That's right. Overnight, there were Russian air attacks, killed 5 people, including a toddler in the northeastern city of Kharkiv. There were attacks elsewhere in the country too. And I think that's what President Zelensky will be doing, going to Washington. He's in Washington already, but talking to Donald Trump against this backdrop of a war that's very much ongoing and affecting everybody here in Ukraine, and putting that message to Donald Trump that there needs to be a stopping to these killings. In fact, President Zelensky's foreign minister accused Russia of being a murderous war machine just a few hours ago, and making that point that Russia needs to do its bit in stopping the killings, agreeing to a ceasefire before then discussing a way forward to lasting peace. That's one thing that he will be putting to Donald Trump, with the support, of course, of European leaders later today in Washington.
And Katie, I know that you've been out and about, you've been talking to Ukrainians on the ground. What are they hoping for from this meeting?
Well, I think that the idea of hope is a good one, because I was talking to a Ukrainian asking exactly that. Are they hopeful about this meeting in Washington? And somebody said, we never give up hope. We're always hopeful. But I think they're reining in expectations. Ukrainians watched Alaska, where President Putin was given, a welcome. The red carpet was rolled out. There was a very pally relationship they could see between Donald Trump and the Russian president. And that was very uncomfortable for people here. So President Zelensky perhaps is on the back foot in having to convince and talk to Donald Trump about how Ukraine sees a plausible path to peace. But at the same time, the fact is that President Zelensky will be able to have Donald Trump's ear. He's got the support of European leaders, and they can put that case to Donald Trump that Ukraine needs to be involved in any discussions. President Zelensky's been very clear that there's no ceding of land. He's barred in the Ukrainian constitution of doing so. And also, people here in Ukraine don't even think that's a concession. They don't understand how, giving land to Russia that they shouldn't have taken in the first place is even a positive, plausible way forward.
Katie, as always, thank you very much. Katie Watson there joining us live from Kyiv.